The average salary in the US might be $65,000, but what if you only make $50,000 a year? Can you still buy a home? Especially with just 3.5% down. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how much home you can afford, what the monthly payments look like, as well as what loan programs make it possible. But before we do that, let me know in the comments, what do you think the right percentage of your income is to be spending on housing? Now, I want to set the stage a little bit. The reason we're talking about a $50,000 income is because that's what you all asked for. I've done videos where I've talked about $65,000, $75,000, $100,000, $150,000, and many of you have replied going, who makes that kind of money? So what I wanted to do is take a step back and talk about what it looks like at a $50,000 a year income. Now, when I'm using the $50,000 income, understand that can be two different people making $25,000 each, because at the end of the day, you can apply for a loan jointly, or it could be one person making $50,000 a year. But with that said, I want to be very, very clear. It's not impossible to buy a home with a $50,000 salary, but it is tough, especially in high-cost markets. But like you always hear me say, real estate is local, which means you're likely going to have a lot more options in, say, the Midwest than you are here in Southern California. Now, when we're talking about how much you can afford with a $50,000 salary, we're going to take a look at it from three different viewpoints, if you will. We're going to take a look at it based on what Dave Ramsey recommends that you should do. We're going to take a look at the 28/36 method, which is really, really popular out there online. And then we're also going to take a look at FHA's guidelines, what they allow, so that ultimately you can see the differences between the three, so that when you are ready to buy a house, you have an idea of which direction you're going. Now, the first method we're going to take a look at in today's video is Dave Ramsey's method. Dave says spend no more than 25% of your take-home pay on your total housing expense and do it on a 15-year loan. So let's take a minute here and actually figure out what that looks like. So when we're looking at your salary, say $50,000, well, that's going to break down to $4,167 per month. Well, one thing to note about Dave Ramsey's method is that he wants you to spend no more than 25% of your take-home pay towards those housing expenses, which means we need to factor in taxes when we're looking at that $4,167 per month, which in my calculation, we're going to estimate it's going to be somewhere around 20% for taxes, which means you're actually left with around $3,333. So this is where it gets a bit dicey, because he only wants you to take 25% of that, which means the max that you can spend on your total housing payment, including the mortgage payment, the property taxes, the insurance, if there's mortgage insurance on it, is $833 per month. And if that wasn't enough, now we have to do it on a 15-year loan, which actually puts you in the range of somewhere between a $75,000 and a $90,000 home purchase, which, let's be honest, is super unrealistic unless you're in a super, super rural area or you have a very large down payment. So instead of actually breaking down that total monthly payment, I want to go up a little bit and take a look at the 28/36 method. This is one that's really, really popular on the internet. When you search how much income should you use towards your housing expenses, this is essentially what comes up. But as you'll see, is somewhat still very, very conservative compared to what FHA will actually allow. But in this example, the lenders actually use your gross monthly income. That's before any taxes come out. So in the case that you make $50,000 a year, we divide that by 12, that's $4,167 per month. Which means if we take 28% of that, which is your front end ratio, that means that you can spend $1,167 on your housing expenses. Now, something really, really important to understand here, when I say housing expenses, I'm talking mortgage payment, property taxes, homeowners insurance, if there's an HOA, any mortgage insurance, that sort of thing. What I'm not talking about is your electric bill, your gas bill, what you pay for cable, phone, any of that stuff. It's completely separate. Even though in your head they might be housing expenses, the lender is not factoring those into that 28%. Now, you're probably watching this going, okay, well, where does the 36 come into this equation? Well, the 28 is the front end ratio. The 36 is the back end ratio. Your front end ratio is just your housing expenses, all of the things that we mentioned a moment ago. Your back end ratio is your housing expenses plus any other debts that show up on your credit card, things like car payments, credit cards, student loans, any sort of installment loan. So all of those things added in can't be more than 36% of that gross monthly income of $4,167. So in this case, it can't be more than $1,500 a month, which means if your mortgage payment is $1,167, you have room for somewhere around $330 of other debt. debts, those car payments, credit cards, student loans that we talked about. Now, if you have more debt than that, that doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to qualify. It just means you're not going to stick within this 28/36 method that we're talking about. But in the case that you're using this ratio, you'd likely qualify for a home somewhere around $140,000 to $150,000 using an FHA loan with a 3.5% down payment. Now, I'm not going to get super detailed on how FHA loan works here, but I want to take a minute here and break down that payment so that you can actually see what it looks like. So if you're buying a $150,000 home and you're putting 3.5% down, that's $5,250. Now, one thing about FHA is they have upfront mortgage insurance that they require on every single loan. Regardless of your credit score, regardless of how much money you're putting down, they charge you that 1.75%. So it's actually added back to the amount you're financing. So in the case of a $150,000 home, that upfront mortgage insurance is going to be $2,533, which means you're going to end up financing $147,283. Now, interest rates today on FHA are somewhere around 6.25%, which is going to give you a total mortgage payment, principal and interest, of $907. Now, on top of that, you're going to have property taxes. Now, depending on where you're living in the United States, that number is going to vary. But the nationwide average is 1.1%, which means your property taxes, if they were that nationwide average, would be $138 a month. On top of that, you're going to have homeowners insurance. This covers fire, it covers theft, that sort of thing in your property, which in my estimation is going to be somewhere around $50 a month. And then another thing you have with FHA is monthly mortgage insurance. Now, it's 0.55% and it's required on every single loan, again, regardless of your credit score, when you're putting just 3.5% down. And in this example, that's going to be $67.50 per month, which is going to give you a total monthly mortgage payment of $1,162, which, if you remember, in order to stay under that 28%, we had to be under $1,167, which basically means this is the most that you'd be able to qualify for at that 28/36 method. Now, before we dive into the final scenario of basically maxing out your ratios and going FHA, do me a favor and let me know in the comments what you think of the first two methods. Do you think Dave Ramsey's method is realistic, or do you think the 28/36 method is conservative enough without being crazy? Let me know in the comments. Now, this third method that we've talked about earlier is going FHA. Now, one thing about FHA is it is the most lenient loan program out there when it comes to qualifying. Because not only does FHA have better interest rates than conventional, it also has higher debt-to-income ratio requirements, which means they basically allow you to have more monthly debt and qualify for more home than that of conventional or, say, USDA. And with that said, they allow you to go to a 47% front-end ratio. Remember, that's 47% towards your housing expenses, with also having an additional 10% of your income going towards other debts like your car payments, your credit cards, your student loans. So they allow you to have a 47% front-end ratio and a 57% back-end ratio. So in the case that we're still using that $50,000 salary, again, the lender is using gross monthly income, which means $4,167. So we're taking 47% of that, which means your housing expenses can be as high as $1,959 per month, while still having around $416 in other monthly debts in order to stay under that 57% back-end ratio, which in this example allows you to buy a home at $240,000. Now, remember, with Dave Ramsey's method, all we could buy is somewhere between $75,000 and $90,000. With the 28/36, we were at $150,000. And with this FHA method, we're at $240,000. And how that breaks down is an $8,400 down payment. That's 3.5%. But you are going to have that upfront mortgage insurance that we discussed earlier. That's going to be $4,053, which means you're financing $235,653. The interest rate's still going to be the same at 6.25%, giving you a mortgage payment of $1,451. Your property taxes are roughly $220 a month. Your homeowner's insurance are roughly $125 a month. And then you're still going to have that monthly mortgage insurance at $108 a month, giving you a total monthly mortgage payment of $1,904, which still allows you to fit within FHA's front ratio limit when it comes to housing expenses. Now, you're probably watching this going, well, I can't buy a home in my market based on a $50,000 salary and the three methods that you went over. So what are my options? Well, you have a couple of different options. One is you look in areas that have a lower cost of living, where you can buy houses around the prices that we discussed in today's video. Your other option is maybe looking into home buyer grants. Every city, every state has grants that help first-time home buyers. Now, some cities, some counties offer more money than others, but here in Southern California, there's grants between $20,000 and $50,000 depending on the area that you're trying to purchase. Now, the unfortunate thing about grants is they vary per city, per county, per state. There's a lot of nuances between these programs. So you need to find a local lender that understands them, because by taking advantage of these grants, it can really help you boost your purchasing power. Now, another thing you can also do is eliminate debt to also help you increase your purchasing power. The less debt you have, the more money you can use towards that housing expense, allowing you to buy more homes. And ultimately, the last thing is you could wait for interest rates to drop. Every 1% or so that interest rate drops adds about $25,000 to $30,000 of purchasing power to your budget. Now, with that, if you're somebody going through the home buying process, trying to figure out where you stand, trying to see if you can qualify for a home, whether you make $50,000 a year or $100,000 a year, my team would love to help. You can actually get in touch with us using the link in the description of the video. We can walk you through that pre-approval process. We can hold your hand. We've helped hundreds of people here on YouTube, and we'd love to help you too. Now, the bottom line here is that a $50,000 salary is not going to get you luxury, but with the right strategy and the right team on your side, you can become a homeowner. Don't just ask how much you qualify for, but rather ask what you're comfortable paying per month and let the lender work backwards to help qualify you for the right amount. Now, the last thing I want to say is that FHA does allow flexibility, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's for you. It doesn't necessarily mean that you should be stretching your budget to those numbers. You need to figure out which of those methods that I discussed today is actually right for you after you've created your budget, after you've figured out how much you can spend on a monthly mortgage payment. Which of those methods actually works best? Do me a favor and let me know in the comments. And while you're there, do me a favor and let me know, do you think somebody making a $50,000 salary should be spending $2,000 a month towards housing expenses? Let me know in the comments. And if you're somebody watching this video and you say, well, I make more than $50,000 a year, this video didn't help me out, I need to know how much I can qualify at a higher amount, do me a favor and check out this video here.